Hmm. Okay. So, this week, as you probably are aware, yeah, I'm just wondering what's going on over here with the recording. It doesn't seem to be recording as it usually does. Okay, see what happens. Okay, so this week, the Torah reading for this week is called Mishpatim. Mishpatim means really judgments, things that generally go on in a court of law, but judgments that have to do with things that are really rational, with rational laws that are relevant to rational analysis. Let's put it that way. And one of the interesting things to note is that the Zohar says about this. The Zohar says about this week's parsha, this week's section, has a very, very long and somewhat complex analysis of the main ideas of what's going on over here in this reading. And it says very interestingly that this is the secret of Gilgulim, the secret of reincarnations. Yeah, it is recording, but it's not recording to the computer. It seems to be recording to the cloud. I don't know why, but didn't give me that option today. All right, whatever it is, it is. I'll get it from the cloud afterwards. No big deal. Okay, so what does that mean, therefore, that all of these things have to do with reincarnation, the reincarnation of the soul? So basically, I think I mentioned the story before, maybe more than once, but just to refresh your memories, the Maggid Mezritch, who was the chief disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, had a question about this as well. He didn't understand why monetary laws, which is laws of damages and so on, which is what most of this section is about, why it has to do with Gilgulim, why it has to do with reincarnation of the soul. So he asked his teacher, and his teacher told him, in order to be able to understand that, so you have to go to such and such a place at such and such a day, on such and such a day, such and such a time, and observe what happens. So the Maggid Mezritch, who was a very obedient student, put it that way, he of course did what his Rebbe told him to do, what his teacher told him to do, his master, and he went there. He found a place overlooking this sort of grassy area where the road passed a tree, a very large tree, and when I say the road, it was really more of a path than a road. In those days, they didn't really have paved roads so much, but in any event, he's sitting at a distance where he can't be seen, and he sees a man. It's a very warm, pleasant day. A man comes by, and he takes off his coat, and he's resting, and then, he falls asleep for a little bit, and eventually he wakes up, and he gets up, and off he goes. The Maggid notices that the man dropped his wallet, a rather fat wallet, in the place. He didn't know what to do, but just as he was about to go and retrieve the wallet and go after the guy, another fellow came. And so he remained in his place, and he's watching what this person did. Well, this person also went to lie down, and he rested in the shade of this tree for a while. And then, as he was getting up, he noticed the wallet. He picks it up. He looks to see if there's any signs on the wallet about who it belongs to, the owner, the address, telephone number, which they didn't have in those days. But he looks to see if there's any signs of who could have owned this, and no signs, no address, no anything like that. So he puts it in his pocket, and off he goes. Then a third person comes to the place. He also comes. He lays down in the shade of the tree. And he's still lying there when the first person comes back. The first person says to him, what happened to my wallet? So he says, your wallet? What are you talking about? So he says, yes, the wallet that was here, the wallet that I must have dropped underneath this tree while I was resting. I didn't see any wallet. So he starts yelling at him and shouting at him, and eventually he even strikes him. He hits some man, and the man doesn't know what's going on, but he doesn't retaliate. And the first person goes off very angry and in a huff because he didn't recover the wallet that he had. Anyway, that was the incident for the day. And the Maggid, after the sun was close to setting, went back, and he went back to the Baal Shem Tov, and he said to him, this is what happened. So the Baal Shem Tov said, now do you understand? He said, no, I don't. So the Baal Shem Tov told him the following. He said that first person who lost the wallet, the guy who lost the wallet, in a previous incarnation actually owed that amount of money to the fellow who found it. What had happened was they had a business deal, and there was a dispute about some of the money, and then they went to a judge, a Jewish rabbinical judge, right? The rabbi of the court, who did not look deeply enough into the law, and he ruled incorrectly. So he gave the money. He said that the person who actually owed the money did not owe it. And the person to whom the money was owed, he said, you don't get anything. So they came back in Gilgul, they returned, they were reincarnated so that they could fix this issue. They would fix the issue. In other words, the person who owed the money lost his wallet. The person who found the money got the money back now. And the judge, who was the third person, got smacked in the head for not looking properly into the law and ruling incorrectly. So that's one of the stories of that's a very interesting story that has to do with Gilgul, with reincarnation. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the details, obviously, of this idea, but when the Torah, the reading from scripture for this week, talks about the idea of an eved, for example, when a person comes back, when a person is a slave. So the Zohar again talks about how the slavery is a correction, a tikkun for his previous existence, for a life that he lived previously, where he needed to rectify some particular thing. Slavery, as you probably know biblically, is not forbidden, although slaves have to be treated actually fairly well. In fact, slaves are, although they are enslaved for a period of time, there are certain conditions under which they have to be let free. For example, if they lose an eye or a tooth or something like that. There's other conditions under which they have to be let free. And when the slaves are freed, they're actually given a certain amount of money. And while they're enslaved, their children and their children and their wife, if a man was married, have to be supported by the master. So it's not slavery like we generally think of it. It's more like it's servitude, yes, but it's not slavery in the horrible sense that we know from our times. It was more of a punishment, usually often meted out by the courts. There were two possibilities for slavery. One was that the person sold his labor. He sold himself as a laborer because he didn't have any money. Or alternatively, he was sold. Yeah, that would be like an indentured servant. Yes, that's correct, Dennis. Alternatively, he was sold by the court for theft, which he couldn't pay back. When the court had ruled that he had to pay back something, he couldn't pay it back, then his labor is sold, so to speak, as a slave, until he's worked off his debt. That's basically the way it works. Okay, so Without going to the details of what it states in the Zohar, I would like to take a sort of 30,000-foot view of this idea. When we say that the Gilgul is a tikkun, is a rectification, what do we mean? Well, first of all, the first and foremost, it's not a punishment. It's a way of working off things in order to ensure that the soul is purified of certain impurities that it had in past, from past incarnations. The number of incarnations is limited. If a person does not manage to rectify things in the amount of time that is given, or in the number of Gilgulim, the number of incarnations, if he's not able to rectify it during that time, then other alternative means of rectification are applied. But that is the preferable way of doing things. Why is it the preferable way of doing things? Because really a person can do a tikkun, he can rectify things, and he can rectify things in such a way that he's completely transformed. Now, in order to explain this, I would like to tell you a story from the Talmud. There's a story in the Talmud, if anyone wants to look it up, it's in Baba Metzia, I think 85a at the bottom of the page, if I'm not mistaken. 84a. So the story is told in this tractate of the Babylonian Talmud. The story is told of a certain person whose name was Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Shimon was his first name, Ben, the son of Lakish, was his father's name. Now, this Reish Lakish was initially very poor. He was very, very poor. And he got into very bad company, into the company of thieves and brigands and highwaymen and so on. He got into their company, and because he was smart and he was strong and resourceful, so eventually became the head of the chief what would you call it, highwayman, right? The chief thief. That's what he was. And he would guide his fellow thieves into as to where to steal and from whom to steal and so on and so forth. He was a pretty successful thief. He was good at his job. So one day he's passing by, he's walking along the banks of the Jordan River, and he sees in the river someone who is named Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was one of the great sages of the Talmud, and he was bathing in the river. When Reish Lakish saw him, he took off his clothes. He was on the other bank of the river. Rabbi Yochanan was close to one bank, and he was on the other bank. He took off his clothes as well, and he jumped into the river. According to some explanations, he was intending to get out of the river on the other side, take Rabbi Yochanan's possessions, his wallet or whatever it was that he had in his clothing, and then return and get dressed again. And he didn't want to make his clothes wet or whatever, and that's what he would do. So he jumped right from one side of the river to where he got undressed, all the way to the other side of the river. It was a huge feat, something that not many people could do. So as soon as Rabbi Yochanan saw this, he said to Reish Lakish, with such power, if you become a scholar, a Torah scholar, you'll succeed fantastically. And Reish Lakish looked at him and he said, and your beauty, apparently Rabbi Yochanan was a very beautiful looking person. He said to him, your beauty is for the women. If my strength is for Torah, your beauty is for women. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan said to him at that point in time, he says, I have a sister who's much more beautiful than me. And if you return, if you do what you're supposed to do, if you do tshuva, if you repent, and return to the ways of truth and righteousness, I will give you my sister's hand in marriage. He obviously saw that they were meant for each other. And in fact, that's what happened. And Reish Lakish became a very, very prodigious sage, Talmudic sage, and he studied on a regular basis with Rabbi Yochanan. And they, in fact, became study partners and would argue cases with each other or against each other in the Talmud. There's many cases where Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish would argue. Okay, so that's the story that the Talmud tells. Now, why does it tell the story, and what do we derive from here? Well, I think one of the ways in which to rectify a Gilgul or rectify a person's life in general is to find the person's talents and reframe them in a positive light. Reframe them in a positive light. So what did Rabbi Yochanan do with this Reish Lakish? He said he saw that he had tremendous strength and alacrity, and he said to him, with such strength and alacrity, you could be a prodigious Torah scholar. That's in fact what happened. Now, there's a teaching from one of the disciples of the Maggid Mezritch. We said before that the Maggid Mezritch was the chief disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, and he himself had 60 very illustrious students, one of whom was named Rabbi Zushya of Anipoli. Was quite a character, quite an interesting figure, a very, very interesting figure, in fact, and extremely humble person. So Rabbi Zushya, had learned to understand. Sorry, let me say that again. He had learned to look for the best in people, so that he could sort of extract that best that he saw in a person and apply it to a situation so that the person themselves would be kind of turned around from where they were. They would be turned around from where they were. In other words, they'd be transformed. So this is the teaching, one of the teachings that Rabbi Zushya speaks about. He says as follows: all of the emotional qualities that a person has, all of the emotions and all of the qualities of character that a person has, even negative ones, can be used for the positive, in a positive way that is according to the teachings of the Torah and the teachings of the sages, according to the teachings of Scripture and the teachings of the sages. And he said like this: he learned 7 things from a thief. What were they? So the first one was what is called in Hebrew Hatznea Lechet. Hatznea Lechet means modesty in what you do. Don't sort of trumpet your accomplishments to the skies. Just be modest, and one doesn't have to reveal everything that one does so that it's on the front pages of the newspapers. Hatznea Leches. It's a very, very important part of being an upright person, is to do things in a modest way. There's many, many things that saintly people do that we have no idea that they did them until the years have passed and they pass away, and only then do people tell. One of the stories, tonight's a night of stories, so one of the famous stories is about the Holy Miser, someone who was known as the Holy Miser. He was a very, very, very wealthy man, and everybody passing through the town and people in the town would come and ask for a loan, come and ask for a gift, come and ask for charity, and so on and so forth. And he would listen to them very carefully, and he would ask them what their problem was and how much money they needed and so on. And invariably, when the person got to the end of the conversation, describing his troubles and what he needed and how much he needed and so on, this holy miser would, he became called afterwards the holy miser, but the miser for the time being, we'll see holy later. What did he do? He told him, listen, go to the butcher, go to the baker, go to the candlestick maker, let them help you out. And he would make them leave the house. And this happened time and time and time again. People were very upset with him. They were so upset with him to the extent that when he passed away, the Chevra Kadisha is the burial society. Every Jewish community has what's called a Chevra Kadisha. Chevra Kadisha means really the holy group of people. They have men's and they have a women's who are assigned to take care of the burial needs of everybody. They make sure to wash and dress the corpse as is proper, the body as is proper, and to put in the coffin. There's a whole procedure that has to be done, and then to make sure that that Kaddish, the morning prayer for the dead is said, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's called the Chevra Kadisha. So after he passed away, this Chevra Kadisha, this burial society, holy burial society, came to his house, and they prepared the body as normal, but everybody in the town was so upset with him that they refused to allow him to be buried in the regular cemetery. They said he had to be buried outside of the cemetery because he was such a nasty old man who took his wealth with him to the grave. So after he passed away, a few days later, people are going to the butcher and to the baker and so on, and the butcher and the baker saying, sorry, they were very, very generous previously. Sorry, I can't help you. Why can't you help me now? What happened? So apparently it turns out that when people were, whatever people needed, this holy miser would actually pay their bills at the butcher, at the baker, at the whatever it was. He would make sure that the bills were paid. And they always thought, everybody thought it was the butcher or the baker or the banker or the whatever it was that was paying the bill and that was being generous towards them. And it turns out it was this man whose name was actually Rabbi Baruch. Rabbi Baruch the miser, right? That's what they called him, Baruch the miser. So the rabbi of the city, the rabbi of the town afterwards, even though they buried him outside of the cemetery, they enlarged the cemetery so that he would be included, and they wrote on his headstone, Baruch the holy miser, right? They added the word, the kadosh holy. Oh, sorry, I left my phone down here. Okay. So that's Hatznei Alech, is to do things in a way of quietly, not that people not to stick out like a sore thumb. You don't have to be a trumpet or a loudspeaker. Do things quietly. It doesn't have to be done in a way that everybody knows the good deeds that you are doing. Although today that's not a bad thing because it publicizes it for others, and they may follow your example. If it's in order to sing your own accolades, that for sure is not a good thing. If it's in order to show an example to other people so that they'll follow you, then it is a good thing, and then you can do it in a public way, and people could see. If people see it, it's fine because the intention is the right intention. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is that a thief, again, these are the 7 things that we learn from a thief. A thief places himself in danger. In order to get accomplished what he needs to get accomplished, he places himself in danger. We have to learn from that too. To place yourself in danger where it is necessary. It's not wise or smart or required in any way to place yourself in danger just for fun or just because. It has to be done only where it is necessary. And in other words, to stand up for principles, to stand up for one's values, in those cases, it is permissible to put oneself in danger. And that we can learn from a thief too. The third thing we can learn from a thief is that even little things have great value, right? Little diamonds, whatever, they would be of great value, and nothing to be it should be ignored. Even little things have great value. That we can learn from a thief too. Fourth, a person must work hard and diligently, right? He has to work hard. You don't get anywhere by sitting on lying on a deck chair, taking it easy on the couch. Hard work is required, and a thief can teach us that too, that he has to work hard in order to make a living. Zrizut, he does things, whatever he does with alacrity. In other words, he doesn't do it like dragging his feet and moaning around how difficult it is and what a tough life he has and so on. He just gets on with the job and he does it properly, and he does it with alacrity and energy. 6, he is boteach u'makaveh. In other words, he trusts in himself and he hopes for the best. Yeah, a thief is always, he trusts in himself. He thinks he's going to be successful. He trusts in his own success. And he has hope for the future. He hopes it's going to work out. Now, obviously, with all of these things, we're looking at the good part of it. Should a person be a thief? A thief, of course not. But nevertheless, he trusts in himself, and he trusts that God will help him. There's actually a Talmudic statement that even a thief, when he's just about to break into a house, calls out to God to help, right? That he should be successful in his mission. So we see that he's trusting in himself. He trusts that God will help him, even though it's against God's will, obviously. And he hopes for the best. And finally, if he doesn't succeed the first time, he tries and tries until he does, right? He tries again and again until he does actually succeed. Okay, so those are the things that we can learn from a thief. Now, why is it that we are being taught this lesson by Rabbi Zusha Vanipoli? And it's repeated in a work called Hayom Yom, which was written by the Lubavitcher Rebbe from the writings and the teachings of his father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher rabbi. Why does he write this here? I think one of the reasons, obviously, because we can learn a lesson, but I think another of the reasons is that by indicating how it is, what it is that we can learn from another person, even a person such as a thief, who's obviously not someone you would normally hold up to be your standard from which you learn things, but because you're learning these things from him to a certain extent, it seems to me, this would rectify the thief himself. It's a rectification of the thief. Therefore, again, when you see a person who is doing wrong things or acting in a foolish way or whatever it is, by looking for the good and expressing it and saying it out loud and saying it out even to the person concerned, preferably, that to some extent is a rectification. Just like Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, that the strength that you have, if you use it in the right way, will get you allow you to make great strides and amazing progress in what it is that you do. So that is the teaching, I think, that we can extract from the Zohar, this week's Zohar, the teaching that when we start to talk about the reincarnation of souls, one way in which the soul is rectified is through reincarnation. And even though most of us today are reincarnated souls rather than new souls, nevertheless, we're retreads, so to speak, trying to fix things up. One of the ways in which you help someone to fix themselves up, and in which you help yourself to fix yourself up, essentially, is by looking for the positive side in things. People can be very harsh and very critical of themselves as well. One of the how do you call it? Tachbulot. Tachbulot is the word in Hebrew. One of the tricks of the called the Yetzer Hara, the inclination to evil. Let's not call it the evil inclination, the inclination that we have to do the wrong thing. One of its tricks is to make us depressed about ourselves, right? To make us downcast and down in the dumps and upset about ourselves. Well, sometimes that's useful at certain times. There have to be times set aside to think about these things. Usually the end of the day before one goes to sleep is a good time, but not during the rest of the day. And even when before one goes to sleep and examining one's day and what one did wrong and resolving to rectify that, the best way of approaching it is always to note what kind of behavior, what was the emotion behind that thing, and to uplift, to elevate, to rectify that particular emotion by using it in a different way, by using it for positive things. For example, it talks about this in next week's reading, actually. One of the ways that you can learn to be a good servant to God, so to speak, is by learning the ways of your own inclination towards evil and using that in a good way. But we'll get to that maybe next week and discuss it. It's more or less what we've been talking about now, actually, but that is the lesson. The lesson is, where if it's another person, find in them 7 good things, 1 good thing, 3 good things, whatever it may happen to be, and let them know about it. And in ourselves, the same thing. Okay, are there any questions?